went into ophthalmology, every single family member I had wore glasses, you know, and I always had perfect vision, so I didn't know what they were doing wrong. I guess I ate my veggies better when I was younger. Not really. I was fed liver and onions every day. Yuck. But yeah, seriously, that's one of the biggest reasons I went into ophthalmology. I just, I'm like, there's got to be a better answer. And, you know, I think this is part of it with Dr. Garowitz's preaching here. And, you know, I'm going to do a little bit of my own preaching here on the surgical side. You know, I think you got, my goal is to get you all to go over with all of your patients risk, benefits, alternatives to everything you treat, including refractive errors and how you treat them, and go over all of their options, from spectacles to contact lenses, myopic control for the myopes, surgical options obviously on our side. I think we have some awesome surgeries these days. You know, I'm lucky to be in ophthalmology in this era, and I think you know, the take-home message is basically there is no prescription that we cannot treat one way or the other, with rare exceptions, of course. LASIK, as you all know, has been around since 1996 for the correction of myopia, a year later for astigmatism, and a couple of years after that, hyperopia was added. I still get questions to this day, what's the indications? The FDA approved indications, depends which laser you look at, but with the most advanced lasers, you can treat technically up to -14 of myopia, up to 6 diopters of cylinder, and up to +6 on the hyperopic side. For a lot of reasons, some of these extremes don't make sense to treat with LASIK because we have better options, or there may be too many side effects for some of the extreme prescriptions. Rarely will we treat more than a +4 hyperopic due to the spherical aberration problems that we have. Because ICLs and clear lens exchanges are better at the higher myopes, we can get away from LASIK for your -8s and higher. That's not to say that I wouldn't do a -10 LASIK. I would. My sister was a -11 and did her LASIK back in '98, and you know, she had 3 pregnancies, and she's a couple years younger than me, and she's still 20/20 uncorrected to this day. So I still think, you know, LASIK is a great option. Feel free to text me. A lot of you already do. If you have the pachymetry numbers, your prescription, if you want to know if the patient's a candidate, just text me or Dr. Mateen, and we can let you know. Cases, I like to do, if patients have had injuries, foreign bodies, a lot of combined PTK with PRK. There's some cases where you get ultra-thin corneas where maybe we'll consider it. There's some military branches that insist on it, even though I don't agree with their rationale usually on why to do LASIK or why to do PRK over LASIK. But there's some special situations where we will still do PRK over LASIK. If you go to Canada, I think it's actually the PRK still is the preferred procedure. I don't know what their problem is with femtosecond and microkeratome flaps, but LASIK is actually not as popular north of the border as PRK. I personally don't like to deal with haze. It's a problem. It's difficult to deal with. Yes, mitomycin C limits the problem, but you know, for that reason, most LASIK surgeons got into LASIK compared to doing PRK was to avoid the subepithelial haze problem, even though mitomycin C is a good way to address the issue. I'm not going to get into RK or other historical keratoconus type of options. No one's ever going to do that anymore, except we'll do a little bit of astigmatic keratotomies, of course, with our IOL type of procedures with the femtosecond lasers. That's kind of where the only role for incisional refractive surgery that I see these days, or doing limbo relaxing incisions at the time of cataract surgery. We do in our practice all custom view or wavefront guided, or not just guided, but well, guided, yes, not just optimized treatments. There's a lot of banter going about what's a better way to do this. A lot of debate in the industry. I'm not going to get into the politics. Basically, it's one company's technology versus another. But for the vast majority of patients, I believe wavefront guided treatments are the way to go. The wavefront aberrometers universally give better overall results with acuity because we're correcting things that you cannot correct for with just a spherical cylinder type of correction. You need to get into higher order aberrations to really make the biggest difference you can with surface resurfacing, reshaping procedures. I'm really excited about the ICLs, for a lot of reasons, including the issues I already discussed regarding LASIK and PRK. It makes a lot of sense to stay away from those procedures in a lot of situations. Maybe you don't like the idea of permanently altering the shape of the cornea. We have a reversible refractive surgery that I still, to this day, cannot believe is underutilized here in the USA. Internationally, you see a lot more phakic IOL implantations put in. In the US, it always was behind the curve compared to LASIK. And because STAAR, which is the only company that has a good phakic IOL, doesn't have the marketing budget that J&J and Alcon do, that's why the ICL just has not taken off. It's purely for marketing reasons. But I want you to keep in mind, I get a lot of texts. I strongly encourage it, and I have no qualms doing ICL on any patient where it's indicated for. The formal indication for ICLs are -3 to -20. You're reducing myopia technically from -16 to -20. You're correcting it for refractive errors less than -16, and we can treat few diopters now of cylinder with the toric ICL version. What's the maximum on the cylinder on the toric ICL, Melissa? 4. We can treat up to 4 diopters. I will do a lot of bioptics procedures. If we have a patient with more cylinder than that, we can do kind of a combination sometimes of ICL with the LASIK. But now we're getting a huge inclusion as far as criteria, as far as what we could, percentage of patients. There's not too many patients with more than 4 diopters of cylinder, but for the few patients that you have, yes, we can get all of that cylinder potentially with a combination of the toric ICL and
Do you have to do LPI the same day or?
and LASIK.
Before.
Laser PIs still have to be done. The question is, can we do laser PIs on the same day as the implantation? The answer is technically no. There are many devices that have been tried for this, but there will be an Evoke ICL which has openings all the way through and through. It is available internationally. We're hoping in the next year or so we'll get the approval here in the USA so that we won't have to do laser iridotomies. But that's one of the biggest hang-ups why why it costs more, because there's more chair time, more that we have to do to get a successful surgical result with the ICLs compared to a LASIK. I'm just talking basically one consult visit, and except for the patients that have to come out of contacts for a prolonged period of time, you're basically good to go with LASIK, whereas there are a couple extra visits with the ICL procedures involved that are involved to get a good result. But again, here's your range of approvals, -3 to -20, and up to 4 diopters of cylinder. Technically indicated between the ages 21 and 45. You can do outside of that off-label, and I have done down to 18-year-olds. they do just as well. It's just the company did not do the studies with sufficient numbers to get a lower age of on their formal indications. And yes, there are going to be patients where you astutely will want to wait until you're sure that they are refractively stable, because you know, as you all can tell me, some patients aren't done changing, especially males, until their early 20s. But in a lot of situations, the patients are already stable by age 18, and where you see the refractive stability, I don't have a problem doing the SELs in under age 21, even though, you know, the company cannot formally endorse that because that would be off-label. And yes, I've done a couple patients older than age 45. Now, you know, after age 50, it kind of makes more sense, I think, with all of our advanced technology, cataract type of IOLs, to just go straight to a clear lens exchange type of procedure once you start getting 50 and older. But, you know, there's always the exception to the rule, and there's a couple gray areas. You know, if you have any questions, you're questioning about, you're wondering, you know, what's the best procedure, you have someone who's in your chair that's interested in doing surgery, contact us. Let's talk it out. There's not a right or wrong answer in a lot of situations, and there's a couple different ways we can go in a lot of situations. So, you know, discuss the age, the pachymetry, the refractive numbers. You know, talk to us about it, and we can come to a collective decision as to what's the best surgery for your patient. I'm going to get into this more in a little bit, but I just got a text a couple days ago from an optometrist in the city. She has a 39-year-old gentleman who's a -40 myope, looking for surgical answers. And yes, we can get that with a clear lens exchange. We may or may not have to do some sort of enhancement afterwards, but it's entirely possible, depending on, we don't know what the patient's exact axial length and corneal curvatures are, but it's possible we might be able to get rid of the whole prescription with some sort of piggyback IOL situation in the eye. So there is no prescription we cannot treat. I recently did a -32 myope. I got rid of as much as we could with the ICL procedure, and then I did a LASIK follow-up to knock out the rest of the myopia. And the patient was uncorrected 20/25 -2, and the patient at best corrected with spectacles preoperatively was 20/40. So I feel pretty good about that one. A lot of advantages over ICLs compared to LASIK: reduced nighttime glare issues, maybe less dry eye syndrome. It's reversible. So let's say, you know, this is Star Trek technology. Obviously, I'm being a little facetious here, but let's say an X-ray vision lens implant comes out 30 years down the road. Well, the nice thing about this is it's reversible. I can pluck this lens out of a patient's eye almost as easily as your patients can take their contact lenses out. I mean, it's that easy. It just pulls right through a wound, a tiny little cataract sized wound, just plucks right out. Then we're back to the patient's natural stage, and then they can do whatever better technology comes out down the road that, you know, a 21-year-old, you know, might want to benefit from something better. Whereas with LASIK, you know, you can't exactly replace the tissue that you've removed. So it makes a lot of sense to do a reversible technology in a lot of cases. And I want to do more of these. You know, I've been touting it since it ever got, I was actually the first surgeon in Illinois to implant an ICL. I did it on the same day as Randy Epstein did. So he and I are the first two in Illinois to do it. You know, I think we should be doing more and more of these, and I want you thinking about doing these procedures or encouraging them for your patients more and more. Dr. Goodwin.
What about hyperopia?
Cannot do hyperopes with ICLs. Only myopes and a cylinder. We can obviously do refractive clear lens exchanges for any level of hyperopia when it makes sense. Camera corneal inlays, they're still there, they're still available. We can do them. It's kind of a niche market where, you know, you have your early presbyope of 45 to, you know, you could argue mid-50s. You're working with the pinhole phenomenon to increase the depth of focus. It does work. It is reversible. It can be taken out. And for a patient who has all the money in the world and can do a few different procedures in their lifetime, might be something to keep thinking about. Talk to us if you have some early presbyopes that aren't going to be happy wearing their progressive lenses. All right, clear lens exchange. So it's kind of the final answer. I mean, it's going to be an ever improving field, obviously, in ophthalmology. That, you know, everyone on this planet eventually has to have cataracts. Eventually, I think this is your final answer for every single patient that walks in your door. Whether you do it prior to cataract stage or not, I think it does make sense in a lot of refractive situations to do it, but prior to cataract stage, and that's where the focus of this lecture is, you know, rather than just talking about cataracts. But basically, we can treat, to Dr. Goodwin's question, pretty much any prescription technically with a clear lens exchange with one of our aphakic IOLs that we implant. The only reason why you wouldn't want to do it, well, besides obvious risks of surgery in general, would be your, 30-year-old, or you can argue about what age we can discuss this, but the point is, whatever lens we put in today, they're stuck with for better or for worse for the rest of their life, right? That can be a great thing, or it could be maybe not a great thing, because while we can look back at potentially taking an IOL out after many years, in general, very few surgeons would recommend it because there's risk of causing detached retinas, and maybe technology advances where it's a lot easier to do 20 years down the road, who knows. But in general, I would go under the assumption that this is it. They're not going to need it, and that's great because the patients are looking to spend a lot of money, and a lot of patients can't ever fathom spending that kind of money that we charge for these procedures twice in their lifetime. So they like the idea that it's permanent, and whereas LASIK, they're going to go through lens changes when everyone gets into the presbyopic stage. But the point is, this is permanent. It's permanent. That could be good. That could be not so good. So if a better technology comes out 20 years down the road, they're not going to be able to take advantage of it. So it's all a relative age thing to me. The younger they are, the more hesitant I am to recommend to do refractive lens exchange, obviously. But if they're already getting into presbyopic stages or will be soon, then maybe it makes a lot of sense to consider doing a clear lens exchange, refractive lens exchange at a certain point in their lifetime. It all depends how extreme a prescription, all depends how old they are, okay? But I've done 28-year-old plus 8 hyperopes, okay? I've discussed this. I had a long discussion with these young folks that they're not going to be able to take advantage of a better technology 20, 30 years down the road. But they're so debilitated by their spectacle correction, they're having so many problems aberration-wise, couldn't tolerate contacts in a couple situations, that I would consider it. Okay, I wouldn't push it on any 28-year-old, or personally, I wouldn't let my kid do it at that age. But if they're a plus 8 hyperope, I might consider something. And I have done LASIK on all of my children, by the way. Okay, so types of lenses. This is a chart, and for those of you who co-manage with us, you're familiar with the chart of all the options that we give regarding cataract or IOL type of surgeries. There's various costs. I don't know if this slide is completely up to date. I think it is. But basically, we have the extended depth of focus class, we have an accommodative class, we have a multifocal, we have a pseudo-accommodative nanoflex technology, we have a single vision toric option as well as a monofocal basic lens option. We use aura measurements with everyone to increase the accuracy of our measurements. We're gonna do femtosecond laser surgery on any refractive type of patient, or we would strongly advise that we do a femtosecond laser technology on their procedure. Right now, the Symphony is our go-to lens for most patients. There's a few patients with irregular corneas that I would not do a diffractive lens procedure. There's a couple maculas that I probably wouldn't do this with, but anyone that we're considering refractive lens surgery for is probably not going to have those restrictions as to whether they're a candidate for the Symphony technology. I'm not going to get into exhaustive talk about how the extended depth of focus technology works. Basically, it's an adaptation of the multifocal technology. It is not technically considered a multifocal lens. You could argue, you know, what's your dividing line about calling it multifocal versus extended depth of focus. But suffice it to say, they made enough changes in the diffractive lens technology that it really is a whole different animal from the older generation multifocals, which we don't do too many of. There are some patients where we will still use an older style multifocal if they're looking to get, you know, J1 plus vision versus J1 to J2 vision near, okay? But the full range of vision with the Symphony lens, I think, necessitates that we call this the leader in the class of aphakic IOL technologies. Accommodative, still use crystal lenses in some corneas that are irregular. RK patients come to mind. I don't like to use diffractive lens technologies in old RK patients, but I will use them here. You gotta be careful about stability of their corneas, because a lot of times we're attributing patients changing vision to changes in the lens, where it could be a combination of weakening of their cornea and causing diurnal fluctuations, and versus the changes that are going on in their eye. But you know, there are some situations where I think the aspheric optic of the crystal lens makes more sense. Nanoflex was the earlier version of essentially what the crystal lens was developed out of. It's an in-between option, doesn't cost quite as much, underutilized, really great material. We can talk to you more about that if you want to get into your refractive lens choices. And I'm going to pretty much leave it at that. Any questions? Thank you.